verse 20 of chapter 9 of Hebrews.
Just ignoring us.
This is the blood of the Testament, which God hath enjoined unto you. I think last week we mentioned that this is very similar to Matthew 26 and verse 28, where Jesus says that this is the blood of the New Testament, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. And I think I asked the question, did Moses actually say this? It does say, saying, this is the blood of the Testament, which God hath enjoined. The answer is no, he didn't. And that takes us into a study which you should have read. Did y'all all read this? You should have by now. And we're not going to go over it in depth, but I do want to at least mention some things about it and kind of summarize some of the things that are in it. The word Testament actually is not in the Hebrew Old Testament. It's the Hebrew word berith, B-E-R-I-T-H. And in the New Testament, there's a couple of words. Syntheke, and really these two words, syntheke and berith, are pretty much the same. There's not really a difference in them. These words means covenant. A diatheke, which is how the New Testament uses it, diatheke, and I think all three of these words are on that sheet. The diatheke embraces the idea of a syntheke, or berith in the Hebrew, but it involves more than that. These two words, berith and syntheke, would be a covenant, an agreement, a pact between generally two or more parties. Diatheke, on the other hand, is a testament. Now, a testament, as I said, embraces the idea of a covenant, but a testament is based upon the death of an individual. A covenant, syntheke or berith, would not necessarily be based upon anyone's death. The Old Testament uses this term berith. The New Testament always uses diatheke. It does not use the word syntheke, even though syntheke would be the more accurate idea that expressed from berith. Now then, why? Well, we mentioned it before. The reason is because under the Old Covenant, they only understood it as a covenant between themselves and God. Under the New, they had a greater understanding that made them realize that the Old Covenant was not simply a covenant, it was a testament as well, based upon the death of Christ. And so there was greater understanding. That's why they used the word diatheke. When you're dealing with covenants, or agreements. There are two different types, and this is a controversy that they get into a great deal when they're talking about the old covenant or the old, and the use of this word syntheke instead. Is the old covenant really a covenant? The idea is, and what many don't realize, is that there can be a covenant between equals and a covenant between unequals. Jim, you have people who work for you. In an agreement, if you tell them what to do you have the right to tell them what to do, or do they have the right to disagree and try and bargain? And
They have the right to disagree, but they don't last very long.
in other words, you do it or else you're fired. That's a covenant between unequals. You are their boss. You tell them what to do. If they don't do it, they get fired. It's fairly simple. That's a covenant between unequals. Covenant between equals, if you take the labor agreement in the NFL, you're seeing them bargaining back and forth. And the owners give up things, the players give up things, and try and work it out, and all of that. That's a covenant between equals. A lot of people, when you talk about covenants, only recognize the one aspect of covenant being between equals, and do not recognize the aspect of covenant between unequals. This, in relationship to God and Israel, it's a covenant between unequals. God is superior, Israel was inferior. God can say, here's my law, you have to keep it, or else suffer the consequences, which would be eternal punishment. Notice in this verse, this is the blood of the testament which God hath enjoined. What does enjoin mean? Fused together. No, that's conjoined. I think
bound upon you or obligated to you.
Okay, something that you're charged with, or to a command or an order. This shows that God enjoined upon Israel. That is, He ordered or commanded Israel. Shows that it's a covenant between unequals. God has the right to give orders to Israel. So this is the blood of the testament which God hath ordered you or commanded you. In verse 21, moreover, He sprinkled with blood both the tabernacle and all the vessels of the ministry. And if you want to read about this, read Exodus, the 40th chapter, specifically verses 9 through 11, and Leviticus, the 8th chapter, verse 15, verse 19, verse 30. And Moses, in dedicating the temple and all of the things of the temple, they literally sprinkled with blood all the utensils, all of the vessels of the tabernacle, and the tabernacle itself. And in doing so, they were dedicating those things to the Lord's usage. So He sprinkled with blood both the tabernacle, all of the vessels of the ministry. Verse 21 then, or 22.
Is that what the Catholics do when they sprinkle all this stuff all over everywhere with that?
Their holy water.
Yeah. Are they trying to do the same? They think they're doing the same thing?
It's-
Holy water?
It's similar. The background's from that.
Brush in it, just
Yeah. And it just sprinkle it around. It's based upon this. Yes, same thing. Even though they don't use blood, it's water for them. But yes, same thing. Verse 22, and almost all things are by the law purged with blood, and without shedding of blood is no remission. This goes back really to Leviticus, the 17th chapter, and verse 11 in particular, where Moses writes, "For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make an atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that maketh an atonement for the soul." Almost all things are by the law purged with blood. The word almost applies to all of this verse, really. It would almost be right to put it, I may almost say that almost all things are by the law purged with blood. Now, why does he use that? Well, because there were exceptions to this. If we had time, we would read all of these, but we don't. So you can read them at home on your own. Exodus 19, verse 10. Exodus 32, verses 30 through 32. Exodus 5, verses 11 through 13. Leviticus 15 and verse 5. Leviticus 16, verses 26 through 28.
16:21.
26 through 28. Leviticus 12, verse 6. Numbers, chapter 16, verses 46 through 48. Numbers chapter 32, or 31, and verse 23 and 24. Then you can add Psalm 51, verses 1 through 17, and Psalm 32, verses 1 and verse 2. So there were exceptions. So almost all things are by the law purged with blood, is really what he is saying here. Not everything, but almost everything. There are some exceptions. Verses 23 through 28, then, salvation is secured by Christ's death. And in verses 23 and 24, a better tabernacle purified with better blood. Verse 23 specifically now, the earthly tabernacle is cleansed with animal blood. It was therefore necessary that the patterns of things in the heavens should be purified with these, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. Necessary it is a compelling force. It is the opposite or opposed to an aspect of willingness or constraint. Opposite of willingness. It shows constraint. It was necessary. It wasn't willingness. It was compelled. A compelling force is the word that's used. That the patterns. This is a Greek word which means a pattern to be imitated. A representation or type. It's the word used in Hebrews 8 and verse 5, except there it's translated example. It's the same word is used as translated here, patterns, who serve unto the example and shadow of the heavenly things.
Why did they do that? Why would they use two different words in the same, almost paragraph, I guess, if you really look at these, the way they go, on that paragraph, the same body, talking about some of the same things, but they use two different words in English was the Hebrew, was it, or the Latin, whatever this came out of, was it
The Greek.
was it the same?
In any language, the same word might have various meanings depending on context. Well, think of the word mind. What do you think of?
Gold mine.
No, that's M-I-N-E. I'm talking about M-I-N-D. Mind.
Right.
Brain?
To obey.
To obey?
Oh.
Which one is it?
And on contact.
It depends. You're right. It depends on the context. That's what I mean when you're looking at any language. A specific word is defined by the context.
So these two words are talking about the same thing.
The same idea. And I don't know the answer to that, other than
They were human.
and the context does seem to be pretty much equivalent in both usages of it here, and why they would use it in one word one way and another word another way, I don't know.
I just say idioms of people of that day, and the Holy Spirit used it to obey the truth of it, didn't
This wasn't the Holy
Well,
Spirit,
this is the translator's decisions
he?
in translating
Holy
it
Spirit,
into our
right,
English.
whatever.
Why did he use the word, or why did they translate hupodiegma as example in Hebrews 5:8? Why did they translate it patterns in Hebrews 9:23?
That's been kind of confusing. It comes out
Well, I
like,
asked.
and I don't really know. Maybe they saw a nuance of the two words that they're using in English that we might have lost through the years.
but it's the same Greek spelling, isn't it?
It's the same word, yes, or from the same word. I just offhand, I would have to look. Let's see. As far as it's a dative singular noun neuter in Hebrews 5 and verse 8, and Hebrews 9 and verse 23. It is an accusative plural noun. Maybe that's the reason.
That's supposed to be 8-5 instead of 5-8.
8-5, yes.
The accusative don't mean to be God, like it does in English, does it?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Well, in Hebrews 8:5, towards the end of the verse,
It uses
says pattern.
the word pattern, and there it's a that word actually is tupos, which is pattern, or what we would think of as type.
Only thing I can think of, usually when you're writing a letter, you don't use the same words over and over and over.
Right.
In the same sentence or near the same sentence.
You
try to use
synonyms
yeah.
to express it.
Yeah.
That might be the reason. I say I'm not really. Other than that, I really just don't know. The earthly tabernacle, though, was a pattern of the heavenly. And we'll probably come back to that later. It was purified with animal sacrifices on the Day of Atonement. You can see Leviticus, the 16th chapter and verse 16 along that line and study that. So here's this earthly tabernacle. It's a pattern of the heavenly, a type of the heavenly. The phrase "in the heavens" and then "heavenly things." What does that refer to? The church and
Or heaven.
heaven. Okay.
New heavens and the new earth?
Well, you could say that, yeah. New heavens and new earth, but it's dealing with the church and with heaven. It is a representation patterns in the heavens. That is the tabernacle and all of the things associated with it. But within the context, he's dealing more with the aspect of the blood of bulls and goats. Now, thus, here's the representation of heaven and of the church. It was purified with these things, the blood of bulls and goats. Well, the original, put it that way, also had to be purified with blood. So he's making contrast. Here's the original. Well, the pattern of the original, the representation of it, which was the tabernacle of the Old Testament, had to be purified with blood. Well, if it had to be purified with blood, what about the original? Doesn't it have to be purified with blood as well? Well, yes, it does. Now, the representation is purified with the blood of bulls and goats. But, what he's saying now at the latter part of verse 23, the heavenly things themselves, in other words, the church and heaven, had to be purified with better sacrifices than the blood of bulls and goats. Now, what is that better sacrifice? It's the blood of Christ, the Messiah. So, verse 24, the heavenly tabernacle is cleansed with Christ's blood. For Christ is not entered into the holy places made with hands, which are the figures of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us.
That's always confused me. I mean, I know I accept it because the Holy Spirit said it, but why would a place described like it is in 1 Peter 1:4 have to be purified? Purify the entrance into it, like us, you know, when you're remission of sins in baptism and you walk in the light and stuff.
I don't know.
You don't know.
Because the Bible says so. That I don't really know. It's a problem for all of those who are trying to interpret this verse. The word "for" at the beginning of verse 24, "for Christ," is the Greek word "gar." Anyone remember that word? And what it means?
For
Yeah, it means "for," but what does it mean?
because of
It is an explanation. Here's the reason would be more the idea. Here's the reason Christ is not entered into the holy places made with hands. The holy places, literally, the word "places" is not in the original. And the word "holy" actually is in the plural. It is literally, for Christ is not entered into the holies.
And that goes back to the two compartments of the temple, the holy
Very good.
and the most
That's right. That those two compartments have become one now, and he uses just the word holies to represent both. But here, it would be more specifically what we would think of as the most holy place that he's dealing with. But again, he uses just the one word to refer to both compartments, which are the figures. The word figures. Interesting word here. And some lessons. Type would be the Greek word typos. What would be the type? Huh? What would be the type?
The tabernacle and the stuff leading into it, and the court, and the stuff, the furniture inside, and all that other stuff, the types, plural.
Well, that's what we would think generally. Okay, well, you're getting to it. And in the Greek, this is the Greek. Typos would be translated type. And as we mentioned, it's the word pattern in Hebrews 8:5. Remember? Well, this is antitypos. Antitype. That's the word here that's translated figures.
That's what I said.
Did I say it was wrong? Shut up, woman.
That's okay.
That's right. Figures, as is the word translated here. Literally, antitype. These are the antitype. Christ did not enter into the places, the holies made with hands, which are the antitype. So what's the type? Well, antitype literally is against the type. That's what it means. Anti is against, and so against the type. Same thing, anti-type. Anti against the type. If you go back a few years and you're thinking, these typewriters. You have a key coming up and striking a ribbon that places a letter onto the paper. A type and antitype. Type would be the key. The antitype would be that which would be put on the paper. In reality.
And so the stuff in the Old Testament, the tabernacle would be like a path of shadows and that the stuff in heaven, right?
It was an antitype of those things that are in heaven. Now then, which one's the real? Heaven. And which are the figures of the true. What's true? Okay, you're telling me the application of it here, and that's right. That is the application of it. What's the meaning of the word true, though? Say it.
I said Christ.
Oh, I thought you said something else.
Victor accurate.
The
That-
authentic,
Authentic,
the original.
the genuine, the real. The word genuine or real is the idea of the definition here. Here's the real. Here's the genuine. What is it? Christ, the church, heaven. What is against that? The antitype is the tabernacle and the temple of the old covenant. Moses was the antitype of Christ. Christ was the real.
Well, a lot of times when we think of anti, like the Antichrist, we think of something that's totally different.
There, the Antichrist in 1 John, you're dealing with basically the same type of meaning with anti against Christ there. So it's someone who is against Christ. And that could be applied in various ways. You had the Antichrist back in the days of John. I think one of those antitypes, Antichrist then would have been certainly Gnosticism. Today, premillennialism, Jehovah's Witnesses, or Russellisms, those type of religions are Antichrist. So it's against Christ. Here, against the type. Well, the type is the original, which would be Christ and the church in heaven. Antitype, that which represented it, which represented the real, the true. And so, he thus speaks of Christ's present ministry in the New Testament dispensation, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. So now is that present time. Here you had the Old Testament, that which was the antitype of that which is happening now, which is the genuine, real. The word appear is to be manifest or to be seen openly. And I think there's a great contrast in that we don't see in relationship to what the Jews would see. When the high priest went into the holy place, or the most holy place, what would he do first?
Take the incense in.
Take the incense in. He would fill the compartment with smoke, so that he would not be, and things would not be seen clearly. Christ has appeared in the presence, he's seen openly in the presence of God and by God. No intervening cloud of smoke like the high priest had. Verse 25, a once for all time offering in verses 25 through 28. For yet that he should offer himself often, as the high priest entered into the holy place every year with blood of others. The offering here specifically refers to his entrance into heaven itself with his blood. It would include his death on the cross, but it deals specifically with his entrance into the holy place, or the holies, but more specifically in that type-antitype relationship, that the high priest going into the most holy place, which represented heaven itself. Christ goes into heaven itself with his blood. Now, he didn't have to do it a multitude of times. It was a once-for-all offering. Verse 26. For then must he often have suffered since the foundation of the world. But now once in the end of the world hath he appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. If Christ's offering had only availed for a period of time, then he would have had to be offered repeatedly from the beginning of time itself. Interesting lesson here. And again, we see a problem in the English translation because we don't get this in the English translation. Word world. Almost left the L out in spelling it. World. For then he must have suffered since the foundation of the world, but now once in the end of the world. Gives us a little bit of a problem in understanding it until we understand that there are two different words that are translated by the one word, world. The first one, cosmos. 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 What is cosmos?
Everything out there. Here, the wherever.
Actually, it comes from the idea of orderliness. In 1 Timothy 2, talking about women are to dress themselves in modest apparel, it comes from this word cosmos. It's a form of it.
You mean modest orderliness?
This is the idea of orderliness. Our world is an orderly arrangement. Thus, cosmos. That's the first word. For then he must have suffered since the foundation of the world, the beginning of the universe, the beginning of this orderly system. He would have had to suffer since the beginning of this orderly system, this beginning of this world. But now once in the end of the world, here he uses a different Greek word. Aeon. And this word means age or duration of time. So if the blood of Christ would only avail itself for a period of time, then Christ would have to suffer from the very beginning of the creation, this orderly system, this universe. But now, once in the end of the age, he hath appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. The end, or the word end, is a word which actually means the culmination or the completion. The completion or the full completion of a period of time. That's what I was saying. Full completion of the age.
Would that be the same idea as world in chapter 1, verse 6?
Yes. It is. Very good call. 1:6. We don't have time, but this would be a good study would be to go into Ephesians 1 and verse 10. That in the fullness of the dispensation of, or that in the dispensation of the fullness of times, same thing that he's talking about is here, the end of the age. Or Galatians 4 and verse 4, that in the fullness of time, God sent forth His Son, made of a woman, made under the law. What Paul is saying here is that this which Christ did closes the period of symbolism. It closes that Old Testament economy. Christ, when he died, what happened? He closed the Old Testament economy. He ended it. It was the end of that period of time. Now, would we have gotten that in our English translation? We know the principle, don't we? Would we have gotten it from this verse? Great verse along that line. The word appeared here means to make manifest or to make known. So he is made known, he is manifest, and it's in a perfect passive. Now what's perfect tense?
Completed action, continuing results.
Okay, completed action, continuing results. It's a passive, which means that he was passive in it. He appeared. Completed action, results continue. To put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. Verse 27, and as it is appointed unto men once to die, but after this the judgment. I'm not going to get through with this, but let me introduce the aspect. Take the word "the" out. After it is appointed unto men once to die, but after this, judgment. "The" is not in the original text. Now, certainly this shows that reincarnation is false. But why is this here? Here he's talking about Christ's death, and he had to die once. And then he adds, it's appointed unto men once to die, but after this judgment. The what? Well, we will be raised, won't we?
They're not like Christ.
Well, won't it be like Christ? Won't we be like him and see him as he is? So, I'm getting an evil eye now.
Tell
What? Well, that will be final judgment, but why is this here? Why does he include this here? He's talking about Christ and his death and it being a one-time thing at the end of the Jewish economy for the to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. And then he adds, it's appointed unto men once to die, but after this judgment.
Well, he wanted to point out that he wanted people to respond to the love that Christ showed for us.
No.
Cooperate with his plan.
We're not going to get a second chance? I don't know. Tell us.
So Christ. He's talking about Christ here. Christ was appointed once to die and was judged.
Being judged by being suffering like he did.
No, he was judged. Didn't Christ, and wasn't Christ man? Thus, he died as a man. And what happened? Judgment comes. He was judged. So next week, y'all can think about it and study on it and see what it is. It's very logical.